We care about you at Chevyland.
At Chevyland, the advantage is yours. The Chevyland Advantage. 2 years, no charge scheduled maintenance is included with every new vehicle. And for a limited time, take advantage of 0% APR financing for up to 48 months on select new Chevys. Plus, don't forget, every new vehicle we sell comes with a Chevyland Advantage at no extra charge.
Chevyland cares about you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Louisiana Sports Download. I am your host and owner of GoPreps.com, Hunter Bauer. Today we have a special guest from Northeast Louisiana, Jake Martin of the Ouachita Citizen, and the Morning Drive with Aaron and Jake. Jake, how are you doing this morning?
What's up, buddy? How we doing?
Well, it's I can't believe we're already into week 3 of the high school football season. Of course, we got other sports going on, cross country, swimming, and volleyball all across the state, but just some little news around your area over the last few days. We're definitely going to get into that. We're also going to talk to Jake about some of the top area matchups in the Monroe area. But Jake, I mean, let's just go ahead and dive right into it. Last week, West Monroe head coach Todd Garvin was placed on suspension after a few heat-related illnesses within the program over the last month or two, and got the news yesterday morning. Of course, Jake broke it, Ouachita Citizen. You can follow him on social media. Jake broke the story that Garvin had been terminated as head football coach by West Monroe. Jake, if you want to just kind of go into the process a little bit, if you want to give a little of the backstory, but ultimately, how did we arrive to where Garvin was dismissed as the head football coach at West Monroe?
Yeah, it's a long story. When you kind of get back into the nuts and bolts of it, the hiring process and everything. I guess up front, if you're new to this story, Todd Garvin was relieved of his head coaching duties on Monday. The reason, this comes after a week of being placed on administrative leave, which that was because a fourth West Monroe football player was hospitalized due to heat. And this fourth West Monroe football player missed the previous week due to COVID. Todd Garvin has a black and white policy of, hey, if you miss time, you got to make up for it. And Todd Garvin is, just discipline is number one for him. And one of the things that he adopted when he became the West Monroe head coach is, I'm going to know exactly who's at practice, and it's going to be a blanket makeup policy for everybody because I can't go off of all the reasons as to why. Now, a lot of people disagree with that, especially if, like, say, a death happens in the family. Would a player still have to make up those dates? And the answer is yes, they would. It's blanket. I mean, Hayden Federico, who was trying out for Team USA, he was down to the last 40 players. Was trying to get down to the last 20, and this is in the entire country. He was in California. He had to have makeup work, and he's their starting quarterback. So, again, this applies to everybody. Well, anyway, that happens last week on Labor Day when the kid falls out. He has to go to the hospital. And then the next day he was placed on administrative leave. And you can kind of tell from Todd Garvin's comments and obviously some other things that have been said, it seemed like the Ouachita Parish School Board wanted him to resign. He did not want to resign. In fact, I could actually read you a quote here from Todd Garvin. I told Dan Lane and Todd Geist, Dan Lane's the principal, Todd Geist superintendent, in our meeting when I was on administrative leave, that I'm not quitting these kids or coaches. It would have been easier to leave. I started something at West Monroe and I was going to finish it. Obviously, now that decision is different. I was preparing myself to come back and change some things that I would have to change in order for me to stay. Now, this is a big story because he's the West Monroe football coach. West Monroe is a huge school. West Monroe, of course, is a powerhouse. It gets headlines regardless of what's going on there. It became an even bigger story statewide when Todd Garvin decided, okay, I'm not going to play nice. Usually you have a story like this where everybody plays nice on both sides. The coach just kind of stays quiet, goes out quietly. The school board ends up letting them out of their contract. They puts them somewhere else, lets them out of their contract. They get to go coach somewhere else. Well, Todd Garvin wasn't playing nice after this. Todd Garvin, it was one of those interviews, Hunter, I'm sure you've been a part of some of these, where your jaw just kind of drops. And it's like, Coach, we're still on the record here. And he's like, oh yeah, I know. Let me read this quote for you. I appreciate everyone who was standing beside me and the encouragement they gave. I think there's a lot of things that led to the decision today. When I wanted to apply for the job, I thought some things would change from the higher-ups at West Monroe High School and the administration. One of the words that came to mind when I was demoted 5 years ago was betrayal. I would use that same word to describe what I've experienced today, from the district level to the administration. I think there's a faction. There's a group that was waiting for this opportunity to find something to nitpick to get some of these guys that were on the former staff to get back on that staff. I don't see the loyalty among some of my coaches. I didn't have their trustworthiness in the process especially. It has really been a lot easier to see who I could trust and who I couldn't trust on my staff. That's been transparent. Without this happening, I wouldn't know, but now I do. So that's just a lot to chew on right there. He calls out the administration. He calls out some members of the coaching staff. And that's why this whole story has blown up the way that it has.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of meat on the bones when it comes to this story. And, Jay, when Garvin was hired, it was very well known. He was not the first choice. There were several other big names throughout the state that interviewed, maybe were offered the job at one time and may have turned it down. Again, there was still some animosity from when Garvin was there before with the old coaching staff, prior administration. Dan Lane, who, him and Garvin know each other, comes over. Things don't work out in a couple other areas, and Garvin is ultimately named the head coach for the Rebels. It seems like No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go through the timeline, because that backstory is fascinating. When you go back to Jerry Arledge, who was the head coach, he steps down around springtime. Now, there have been rumors that was going to happen. Like, it was one of those things where, like, I had the story prepared. I was just waiting for it to happen, and it kind of sat on the shelf for months. Lo and behold, it happens. He steps down. Now, there's some back and forth as to whether he wanted to step down or not. That's a story for another day, but he ultimately steps down, and he was going to take on this athletic director role. Well, in comes Dan Lane. He gets hired as the principal. Well, I guess I should go back. They open up the job, obviously. At the same time, they were hiring a new principal. And so they didn't get a ton of applications the first go around. And I think part of that was the coaches are like, hey, I want to know who I'm working with day in, day out, because y'all haven't named a principal yet. So then West Monroe changed their own timeline and said, okay, we're going to name a principal first, and then that principal is going to make the hire. So Dan Lane gets the principal job. He reopens it. At the time, Todd Garvin had not applied for the job. In fact, I made a phone call to Todd Garvin when his name was being mentioned with the job, and he was Ouachita head coach. He answers the phone, Ouachita football, just, hey man, I'm still Ouachita. So Dan Lane opens it up again. He applies. He was upfront about it the whole time. He told his team, he told members of his coaching staff, told the media, said, yes, I applied. Then it got interesting. You kind of brought up some of the names that were applying for the job, some big fish, some absolutely big fish. There was a premature report that Todd Garvin had gotten the job like the Thursday before. And I can tell you that was not true at the time, because, I had 3 different sources on that committee who were telling me what was going on every single day. And up until the day before Todd Garvin got hired, there was another coach that they were leaning toward. The committee was leaning toward another coach. And I haven't fully published that story because nobody wanted to go on the record, and I'm not going to do an anonymous source story. But I feel confident, like I can just say that much, that there was another coach that they were leaning toward. Something happened that day. Then they all went to Garvin, and it was a unanimous pick for Garvin that night. And then, of course, we broke it that night that he was going to be the new head coach. So it's fascinating when you look at that. Then it gets even more fascinating when you take a look at the history of West Monroe and how Don Shows and Jerry Arledge have been the faces of that program since 1989. Yep. Like 3 decades. I mean, they were the faces of that program. Now you've got the first coaching hire that is not associated with those 2 guys in forever. And so it was weird. And I think no matter who was going to be hired, it was going to be divisive amongst the fan base. Everybody wanted somebody different, and it was names that were mentioned in that process. Everybody kind of had their own horse. Todd Garvin had his supporters, but he knew. In fact, I'll read this comment from him from the introductory press conference. He said, "It's going to take time to win over the fan base. We have the summer and spring to help prepare us, but winning solves all that. That's what Jerry Arledge and Coach Don Shouse did. I know when we do that, we will get some of the support back, and that's a goal of mine, is to get alumni back and get them involved and make sure they're an important resource to our success." The reason why I bring that up, Hunter, is because that's kind of what he's fallen back on. He feels betrayed. I read that quote where he talked about how he felt betrayed when he was demoted. He feels that same feeling now. He feels betrayed by, coaches, whatever, administration, for not having his back. And it all kind of goes back to there where he's like, y'all never really had my back to begin with. And he feels like he put some people in high up positions that didn't have his back. Now, that's his side of it. We got a statement from both Todd Geis and Dan Land, a joint statement saying, "We generally do not comment on personnel matters as it relates to Mr. Garvin. We have read comments attributed to him and have seen his interviews. Should Mr. Garvin, at a meeting later this week with Personnel Director Jason Thompson, be willing to authorize the release of the documents provided him and which explain the decision, we will honor his request." So it's like, hey, if you want to play that way, give us authorization. We'll release the documents that we have. It's been back and forth. Like a lot of people, some people were Team Garvin. Some people were saying, oh, the kids are too soft now. I've seen every comment under the sun. Others are saying it doesn't matter what Todd Garvin says. 4 kids were hospitalized. And Todd Garvin even said himself, like, that falls on me. That was a mistake. I regret that decision. I regret that they went to the hospital. But at the end of the day, 4 kids went to the hospital. And I think that's ultimately what the school board falls back on. And there's potential for litigation and all this too.
Yeah, and it goes to make, look, things are going to happen. You're practicing in 100-degree weather every day. Kids are going to get heat exhaustion. Not to say that it's right and that you should, the practices that were put in place, I'm not excusing them, but the message I'm trying to put across is, things are going to happen. Kids are going to get sick. It's just part of it. Do you think, had those instances not taken place, Todd Garvin would still be coaching Friday night? Or do you think that was the catalyst to kind of, move this train along? And it just doesn't seem like from the very start he had a lot of support outside of maybe the administration and coaching staff.
So this is my opinion. All right. I think, yes, he would be the head coach. I even think this. If the meetings with administration go better after these incidents take place, I think there's a chance he's still the head coach. I think Todd Garvin he's just not going to bend or break. That Todd Garvin is, he believes in what he believes, and that's the bottom line for him. And there's not a lot of gray area for him. That's why I pointed out there's a black and white makeup policy. And the last kid, he fell out because of makeup work. Some people call it punishment work, whatever you want to call it. But that's what happened. He fell out while doing makeup work. A lot of the kids weren't there, in fact, So I think ultimately he would still have his job, yes, to answer your question. Now, I think there's a discussion to be had about what kids should endure, could endure. There's a lot of opinions about that today too. The first time that 3 kids had to be hospitalized, it was up downs. I mean, it was. I had some coaches tell me, "Hey, man, it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable being out there." And I consider myself to be a tough coach, but it was tough. It was tough watching that.
Right.
I had some parents tell me that too, and some parents were ticked off, and I understand that as well. When you send your kid to a school and to practice, you want to believe that, hey, my kids are going to be taken care of. And so, no, I can't say that this wasn't a witch hunt, to answer your question. I don't think this was a witch hunt. I think Todd Garvin feels betrayed. There were some weird things. I'll say this for him, I don't think there's any malicious intent with it. I think these coaches just love the kids and support the kids. But on the sidelines on Friday nights for the Sterlington game, both Jerry Arledge and Tony Osborne, who was the defensive coordinator last year and applied for the job, they're both on the sideline. And so I know he felt weird about that. I know a lot of people felt weird. I had a lot of people comment and ask me, hey, why are they on the sideline? That's weird. I know both Jerry Arledge and Tony Osborne say, I love these kids and I want to support them. But it still doesn't mean it's less awkward for a guy like Todd Garvin.
Right. Yeah. Well, and going back to the punishments, or the makeup work, or whatever you want to call it. I believe when Garvin took this job, that's an enormous amount of pressure to replace, not only Jerry Arledge, but, Don Shouse, that era of football coaching, especially at West Monroe. I mean, do you feel as though he was, I guess personally putting pressure on himself to get these kids ready to compete at a high level, which, a lot of people around the state were saying how, West Monroe kind of lost its touch. It was time for a change. Do you think he took any of that into account, and maybe that's what led to some of these kids, getting sick or hospitalized? Not to saying that he was pushing the envelope, so to speak, but, he was trying to do his best to get these kids as prepared as they could be to endure the weather, endure these, tough couple of first games, which, Sterlington's no joke. East Ascension's no joke. They're really, traditionally, they're good programs. Did a lot of that personal pressure fall on him going into this?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's pressure. I think some say he rushed changing the culture. Some people say he was trying to do a culture change in 2 or 3 months, and he rushed it. I asked him that straight up when I talked to him earlier this week. I said, do you feel like you rushed it? And he said, no. He said his answer was, I can't take it easy in year one, and let's say we win a championship, and then I put forth the program that I want, and we go harder the next year, and then people point back and go, well, we won a championship when you were much more laxed. And so that was his response to that. No, I want us to be tough. And by the way, Ouachita was the same way, man. Ouachita, they were tough. They were up there grinding on Saturdays. There's some coaches I call on Saturdays that are not at the school, right, working. Todd Garvin, every time I called him, he was at school grinding, and his coaches were too. And I think that was a big point of it too, was, hey, man, we're going to get after it. We're going to work our tails off. And Todd Garvin, you can say whatever you want about him. Dude's a hard worker, like an extremely hard worker. I had somebody tell me, I don't think he'll mind me saying this, Bo Barton, I was talking to him. He said, man, I coached Todd one time. And he was not as athletic as the other kids, but man, he was a grinder. He said he just had this edge to him that made him on and surpass the level of some other athletes that he competed with. And I think he takes that same approach to coaching, which is just, I'm going to outwork you. And if you're going to be on my staff, you're going to work hard. In fact, I had some coaches during the process saying, I don't know if I want Todd over here, because I know we're going to be getting after it every single day. It's going to be a grind. And it was. And that's what Todd Garvin does.
Well, I mean, and, you can see it from his time at Ouachita. I mean, look what he was able to do there.
Yep.
Ouachita had struggled, and he came in, changed that culture, ended up beating West Monroe. I mean, it just goes to show you, a coach like that who can come in and change that culture, what he's able to accomplish. But ultimately, you're trying to change a culture that, 30, 40 years old. This is how we've always done it at this school, da-da-da-da-da. So, I don't want to add to the speculation. I know this is fresh and there's things still to be accomplished in this process. But what's been the feeling over at West Monroe? Kevin Davis takes over as interim. The kids are now on their third head coach in a matter of a couple of months. What's the feeling over there? What's the atmosphere like? Is it just business as usual?
I think they're trying to keep it business as usual. I spoke to Kevin Davis after they beat East Ascension. Kevin Davis has been a part of some state championship wins in Texas, and he told me that was a top 5 win for me in my career. He said, just from all the outside noise, all the stuff taking place off the field, to see the kids rally and play well on the road, He said, I told him, and that includes, winning a state championship with my son. Um, to answer your question, I think the coaching staff's doing a good job of kind of keeping it business as usual. What's going to help West Monroe is, they have Delhi Charter this week. And the backstory of how they had that game. I kind of talked about that on air. A lot of people, why are they playing Delhi Charter? Well, West Monroe couldn't find anybody to play. So that's how they ended up with that game. But that should be, West Monroe should win that one going away. And so, again, it allows you time to get used to Kevin Davis kind of calling the shots and being the head man. By the way, he's beloved in that building. Everybody loves Kevin Davis. And so I thought he was a great pick to be the interim head coach. So you have that. You have Scotlandville next week, Hunter, and Scotlandville has gotten off to a rough start this year. I mean, you could probably provide more insight as to why they're struggling, but I've been kind of shocked to see the scores that I've seen. So, just based off of those scores, you're looking at potentially West Monroe being 4-0 heading into a matchup with Zachary. So I think the next 2 weeks set up pretty nicely for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Kevin Davis was the offensive coordinator, so it's not like you're bringing in somebody new to take over a program. So he's already acclimated to the system. The kids are acclimated to him. So again, like you said, probably the best choice to kind of fill that role.
Yeah.
Strictly predictions. Where do you see this process going after the season? Davis is going to serve. If he gets West Monroe to 10 wins, some playoff games, maybe a state championship, do you keep him on as a permanent head coach? Do you try to go outside again and find somebody? In your opinion, what do you think West Monroe is going to be looking for after this season? I guess it all depends on this season.
It does depend. I think it also depends on what Kevin Davis wants. I know a lot of people on that committee wanted Kevin Davis to apply, and he didn't. And he was kind of backing Tawny Osborne, from what I understand in that race, saying, "Hey, look, kind of keep the staff as it is." So the question is, does he want it? I know, like I said, a lot of people at that school, not just that athletic building, a lot of people at that school have a lot of respect for Kevin Davis. And so if he has a lot of success, if the kids love him and this thing's moving upward, I think he's got a shot. Now, what's surprising is when West Monroe opened it up last time, they had some appeal, but it wasn't as widespread as I thought it'd be. I kind of thought, again, they did have some big fish in there, but then, ultimately, one of them pulls out, another one doesn't get the job. And so, with that being so fresh, it'll be interesting to see how this search plays out this time.
Yeah, and going back to what I said, certainly big shoes to fill when you're trying to take over for legends like Jerry Arledge and Don Schaus in that era of West Monroe football. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how everything plays out as the season unfolds. So anyway,
I want to say one more thing, Hunter. People talk about that West Monroe era under Jerry Arledge, and I want to go back to 2018, and because people forget quickly, Jerry Arledge didn't win a state championship as the head coach at West Monroe. 2016, they were runner-up. 2018, they had an undefeated team facing off against Zachary. Zachary gets up to this hot start in the game. West Monroe takes over in the second half. It was the West Monroe show in the second half. You remember the Dome came alive. West Monroe had a lot of people there. It was an incredible atmosphere. And then the Chris Hilton play happened. The 80-yard, wide receiver screen. Some West Monroe fans say, hey, it's blocking the back. They're still a little salty about that. But still, Chris Hilton made a tremendous play, and that beat West Monroe. I think it was 24-20 was the final. I bring that up only to say that West Monroe team, they didn't play the same teams as 98 and 2000. But defensively, their numbers were historically great in school history. It was like single digits what they were giving up points-wise that entire year. They were dominant. In fact, I need to go back. I need to look up how many points they gave up in that postseason. It was insane. I only bring that up just to say they're basically a play away from winning a state championship there. And so when people say, hey, West Monroe needs this drastic change, I always point back to there and I go, a play away from winning a state championship. And I know that, the next year Garrett Common gets hurt right before the season. That threw him off. And then you go back to last year, nobody, including myself, gave them a shot at giving Zachary a run at it. And they lost that playoff game, but it was tight. It was a
Yeah.
close game. Like they had chances to win that football game. So I just bring that up as like I don't know if this needs like a huge change. You know, it might feel that way across the state because West Monroe's now over a decade without winning a state title, but they've been close, man. They've been really close.
Well, and you know, you go back and look at the past decade and the opponents that West Monroe has played, and that's one thing I do have to commend, you know, Northeast Louisiana in general is those teams are not afraid to play the best in the state, whether it's West Monroe, whether it's Ouachita, whether it's Ruston. They always play the top teams out there, usually teams that are in the state championship hunt or go deep in the playoffs year after year. So, you know, it's not always an easy road to get there. And then once you're in the new playoff system that we're in now, but it's still as strong as I think it's ever been, especially for the West Monroes and the Rustons. And look what Ruston was able to accomplish last year. So definitely high school football in Northeast Louisiana is probably, you know, and you know the area more than I do, but it's probably, I would say, stronger than it's ever been as far as the competition and the level of athleticism that comes out of those schools. So, you know, people were saying, you know, maybe it's time for a change at West Monroe as far as, you know, the coaching schemes and things like that. But no doubt about it, when West Monroe lines up on Friday night, they're going to give you your best, whoever they're playing, whether it's Delhi Charter, whether it's Warren Easton, or whoever. So I think that's one thing that people can't say is that West Monroe tries to play the best teams that they can to get prepared for a state championship run year in and year out.
Yeah. Now they've been snake bit on the schedule lately. You know, they had that game against Republic last year, but that was because Catholic and John Curtis said, we're pulling out. We're not going to play y'all because y'all, of course, voted against the split.
Right.
It's a whole backstory there. And then they had to find this team in Tennessee called Republic, and that was ugly. They had no business. And again, this year, West Monroe shouldn't be playing a team like Delhi Charter. But when you're searching and you can't find an opponent, you know, why not? Because at the end of the day, it's about the kids. And do you really want to have a bye week and not let the kids play the game? You know, and a lot of kids should get to play in the game.
Well, and, you know, speaking of, you know, on behalf of Delhi Charter, I'm not speaking for them, but, you know, that's a great experience going into a stadium like that and playing a legendary program. It's also, I feel like it's a learning opportunity. You learn how to play like teams like that. You know, you learn how to coach like teams like that. You go into the atmosphere. It may not always be about wins and losses. It's kind of always about, hey, you know, can we get better after this? Can we, you know, escape without getting anybody injured? But if I'm a Delhi Charter football player, coach, I'm excited about going and just experiencing the atmosphere that is West Monroe football. And again, just try not to get anybody hurt, but have a good time and just play some good football.
Yeah.
So, anyways, well,
no doubt.
Go ahead.
I was saying, no doubt, man.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So definitely continue to follow Jake on social media for anything else that's going to happen in this interesting situation moving forward. Again, Kevin Davis takes over as the interim head coach for the Rebels, who are going to host Delhi Charter Friday night. So anyways, Jake, before we let you go, top games in your area Friday night. I know there's a couple of unbeatens. I know Sterlington's going to take on Oak Grove. Oak Grove kind of struggled against Ouachita Christian last week. Talk to us about some of the games that you're looking forward to in your area.
Yeah, you mentioned Sterlington, Oak Grove. How can you not be fired up for that? Oak Grove lost to OCS last week, but, you know, last year they got hammered by OCS. OCS turned around and beat Sterlington 52-20. So I think there's a perfect lesson right there that, hey, don't count Oak Grove out this week. You know, that's a great little rivalry. I love seeing Sterlington play a team like Oak Grove, because Oak Grove's capable of beating any 3A team in the state. And I still have a lot of faith in Oak Grove moving forward. That was just OCS's night. Sterlington, it looks as advertised. You know, they look good against West Monroe. They were a play or two away from potentially winning that game, honestly. And then you look at how they beat Mangum 41 to nothing. So, Sterlington's very good. A couple other games, Gina and St. Frederick's really interesting. You
Yeah,
look at Gina; they're off to a fast start,
great
really
running
fast
back.
start. They just Derek Jones, man. How many times have you seen a team return a two-time district MVP? And that's what they have in Derek Jones. The fact that he's a two-time district MVP, he's off to a great start this season. St. Frederick, Montrell Connor Jr. For those of you out there who might remember the name Montrell Connor, he was a big-time playmaker for Ouachita, mid 2000s. And this is his son. And man, he is fast. He's electric. He's dynamic. He's worth the price of admission. So St. Frederick's looking pretty darn good. They ran into a buzzsaw and Franklin Parish, who has a kid in Javion
Yeah.
White, who's going to go to Tulane. That's phenomenal. I mean, he is phenomenal. So I'm excited about that game. Richwood, West Ouachita, two unbeaten teams meeting. Richwood, it's a big step up in competition as compared to what they've been playing so far. West Ouachita, Mike Rainwater's done a great job with that program. Antonio Cadillac Ford is a legit D1 prospect. Might be the best back in our area this year, as a matter of fact. And I'm anxious to see if they can kind of slow down with these turnovers. They turn it over far too frequently. They did so last year in a 27-26 victory against Richwood. If they do it again this year, Richwood's defense is good yet again under Bakari Geis, and they're able to be opportunistic. And if West Ouachita coughs it up again, we're going to get another great game out at Richwood Friday night.
What real quick, what's been the biggest surprise for you so far? I know it's only been 2 weeks, but is there a team that's kind of stood out, a team that's not really, performed up to its standard that kind of, just sticks out to you up in the Northeast Louisiana area?
I think Ouachita has been a pleasant surprise. I think Ouachita beating Rummel
Yeah,
and then turning around and nearly beating Neville. You talk about teams up here playing good teams. That's their first two opponents. They're facing a Conway, Arkansas team that won 9 games last year. Very good team. Hammered them last year, actually, 63-20. They're playing Brother Martin, and then they're turning around playing OCS. So like their cupcake on the schedule is OCS, who is capable of beating them. Almost beat them last year. That was actually a pretty tight game. Cardell Summers rushed for 300 yards, and that was the difference.
Yeah.
And Ouachita won it by double digits, but that was still a competitive game. Could see something similar this year. But yeah, man, Ouachita's been a pleasant surprise. I'd say Neville's been not as sharp as I'd like them to be. I've talked so much this preseason about their skill and how much I believe in their skill, and they just have gotten off to a little bit of a slow start. I want to see those receivers making some bigger plays because I do think they have a chance to be the best receiving core in our area. They haven't really proved that yet on the field. Not giving up on them by any means, but offensively, just a little sluggish the first 2 weeks. Jalen Nichols has been pretty darn special running the football. But I'd like to see Neville take that next step with their receiving core moving forward.
Yeah, and for Neville, on paper, against a good Huntington team, you think this will be a good matchup.
Could be.
Looking at the statewide stats, Lorenzo White, quarterback for Huntington, he's third in the state in passing with 620 yards and 8 touchdowns. So definitely going to be a task for Neville's defense Friday night. I know a lot of people think, oh, Huntington. I don't think that. I think it's going to be a good matchup. What do you think about that?
So yeah, when I do top 5 games in the parish every week, I was gonna just kind of mention this one, and I started looking at Huntington a little bit more because last year Neville beat them like 49-12 or something like that. I mean, it was ugly, and that might have been Neville's best performance all year. And so I'm not thinking very much of this matchup. And then I start reading about Huntington a little bit. I know, the coach was excited about some of the starters that they had returning. Start looking at some scores, the way that they're scoring. They're averaging over 40 points per game this year. It's like, this is interesting because, granted, they're giving up a lot of points too, but this is a great opportunity for Neville's offense kind of kick into gear. And if Neville's defense doesn't come to play, we could see a shootout in this game. So it is a lot more interesting than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, I also want to mention Caleb Tucker is a wide receiver for the Raiders. 10 10 catches for 283 yards and 5 touchdowns. So definitely a target for the Raiders and something for the for Neville to look out for Friday night. Jake, man, we appreciate having you on. We always enjoy our discussions. Real quick before we let you go, tell people where they can follow you on Twitter, and then talk about the Morning Drive radio show real quick.
Yeah, man. On Twitter, Jake Martin OC, WashitaCitizen.com for all local sports news. My co-host Aaron Dietrich, we have a radio show every morning from 6 to 8, the Morning Drive with Aaron and Jake. You can check out our Facebook page. We have a live stream every morning. Yeah, we focus on North Louisiana sports, but I'm sure some people would like to check out what's going on up here. If you're interested, check us out. Like I said, the Morning Drive. With
and if you live live outside the area, you have teams that are coming into the Neville area as well, such as your Huntingtons and your Cabot Arkansas and things like that. Tune in. They talk about everything. They discuss every game that's going on Fridays, or try to anyways. They talk to coaches and they try to break it down. So it's a great show. I try to catch it every morning when I can to at least hear about the latest in the high school ranks. But they also talk college, pros. They talk everything. They even talk a little MMA over there. Ain't that right, Jake?
When I get a chance to, absolutely.
Jake, man, we appreciate you appreciate having you on, and we'll probably get you on again probably near the end of the regular season as the playoff races start heating up. All right, Jake.
Good, brother.
Thank you,
Appreciate
man.
you.